They pulled him off the plane like he was trespassing. He owned 14% of the airline. He did not yell. He did not curse. He did not make a scene. He stood up from his seat in business class, buttoned his charcoal suit jacket with a kind of calm that only comes from years of being underestimated, picked up his briefcase and walked off the plane with his dignity fully intact. 38 passengers watched him leave. Not a single one said a word. Not one asked why. Not one stood up. They just watched. And in that silence, every single one of them became part of the story. But here is the part they did not know. The man they just removed from that aircraft was not just any passenger. He was not some guy who wandered into the wrong cabin. He was Malcolm Adeyemi, managing director of Kingsbridge Capital, the single largest private investor in Orion Atlantic Airways, the very airline whose logo was printed on the boarding pass tucked in his shirt pocket. His firm held a 14% equity stake, $3.2 billion of skin in the game. And the next morning, he was scheduled to sit across from their entire board of directors in London to present a $6.4 billion fleet modernization proposal that would have made Orion Atlantic the first carbon-neutral major carrier in the Western Hemisphere. But before he could change the future of aviation, someone on that plane decided he did not belong in business class. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a room where you absolutely belonged, where you earned your place, where you paid the price of admission 10 times over, and still someone looked at you like you were lost, like you wandered in by accident, like the seat you were sitting in was meant for someone else? If you know that feeling, then this story is going to hit you different. And if you have never experienced it, then this story might just change the way you see the world. Because what Malcolm did next did not just embarrass them, it did not just expose them, it reshaped an entire industry, and it started with 3 words he said to the CEO of that airline, right to his face, in front of the entire board. But we will get to that. First, you need to understand who Malcolm Adeyemi really is, because the man they pulled off that plane was not made in a boardroom. He was forged in something much harder. If this story already has your attention, do me a favor right now, drop a like on this video. And if you have ever been underestimated because of how you look, where you come from, or what people assumed about you, type "I belong" in the comments. Because this story is for every single person who was told they did not fit and proved the world wrong anyway. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. Malcolm Oladele Adeyemi was born in Ibadan, Nigeria, in a modest house on a red dirt road where the sound of sawing wood was the first thing you heard every morning and the last thing you heard every night. His father, Tobias Adeyemi, was a carpenter, not the kind who built furniture for catalogues or designed custom shelving for wealthy clients. Tobias was the kind of carpenter who built doors for neighbors who could not afford them, who repaired church pews for free on Saturdays, who sanded every surface until it was smooth enough to press your cheek against. He was not a wealthy man by any standard the world would recognize, but he carried himself like someone who owned something no one could take away. He owned his integrity. Tobias had hands that told stories, thick fingers, scarred knuckles, calluses layered on top of calluses, but those hands never once struck his children. They built things, they fixed things, and they held things together when everything else threatened to fall apart. He used to tell Malcolm something that stuck with him for the rest of his life. He would say, "The quality of your work is the quality of your character. If you cut corners on a table, you will cut corners on your word, and a man whose word means nothing has nothing." Malcolm never forgot that, not once, not even when the world gave him every reason to. His mother, Famaleo, was a seamstress. She worked from a small room at the back of the house, surrounded by fabric bolts and thread spools and the soft hum of a sewing machine that had been repaired more times than anyone could count. She made dresses for weddings, uniforms for schoolchildren, and curtains for homes that could barely afford walls. But what Famaleo made better than anything was meaning. She had a way of turning simple words into something that stayed with you. She stitched proverbs into every conversation the way she stitched thread into cloth, with precision, with care, and with the expectation that it would hold. There was one phrase she said more than any other. She would look at Malcolm, usually when the world had handed him something unfair, and she would say, "The world will try to make you small." Your job is to take up space anyway. Malcolm was the third of 5 children. He was not the loudest. He was not the fastest. He was not the one who demanded attention or threw tantrums to get what he wanted. He was the one who watched. He sat in the corner of his father's workshop and studied how joints fit together. He stood beside his mother's sewing machine and noticed how she adjusted tension on the thread without even looking. He observed everything, processed everything, and spoke only when he had something worth saying. His teachers called him quiet. His siblings called him strange. His parents called him ready. By the time Malcolm was 17, he had already decided that education was the bridge to a life bigger than the one he had been born into. Not because the life he had was bad. His parents gave him love and structure and values that money could never buy, but Malcolm could see beyond the red dirt road. He could see systems, economies, networks. He could see how the world moved, and he wanted to be part of the engine that moved it. He earned a scholarship to Howard University in Washington, D.C. The day he left Nigeria, his mother pressed a folded piece of cloth into his hand. Inside was a small amount of money, barely enough for a week of meals, and a note written in her careful handwriting. It said, "Take up space." He arrived in America at 19 years old with a suitcase held together by duct tape, an accent that people either romanticized or ridiculed, and a hunger that no amount of culture shock could kill. Howard gave him a foundation. It gave him community. It gave him the intellectual framework to understand not just economics, but the history of economic exclusion, the architecture of systems designed to keep certain people out of certain rooms. He studied economics first, then finance, then law, not because he wanted to practice law, but because he wanted to understand power. Who built the systems, who benefited from them, who got locked out, and most importantly, how someone who had been locked out could build a key. There was a professor at Howard, an older man with silver glasses and a voice that could fill a lecture hall without a microphone. He pulled Malcolm aside after class one day during his final semester and said something that changed the trajectory of his life. He said, "Understanding money is not enough. You have to understand the rooms where decisions about money get made. You have to learn how those rooms are built, who controls the doors, and what it costs to walk through them. And then, Malcolm, you have to get into those rooms, not to sit quietly in the corner, but to take up space." There it was again, that phrase. His mother's words echoed by a professor 3,000 miles from Ibadan. Like the universe was making sure he heard it. After graduation, Malcolm moved to Chicago. He landed a position at a mid-tier investment firm, the kind of place that looked impressive on paper but operated on unspoken rules that nobody wrote down. He was the only black analyst on a floor of 43. He wore the same 2 suits in rotation for the first 6 months because he could not afford a third. He arrived first every morning and left last every night. He triple-checked every report, every model, every projection, not because he doubted his ability, but because he knew his margin for error was 0. In rooms where nobody looked like him, excellence was not a luxury. It was a survival strategy, and he was excellent. His returns outperformed his peers by double digits in his second year. His risk assessments were the most accurate on the floor. His clients trusted him because he never oversold and never underdelivered. He did everything right, and still they passed him over, twice. The first time, they gave the promotion to a man named Bradley, who had been with the firm for half the time Malcolm had, and whose portfolio had underperformed the market average for 3 consecutive quarters. The second time, they gave it to a woman named Allison, who was talented, yes, but whose biggest client had been personally handed to her by the managing partner at a country club brunch Malcolm was never invited to. Nobody told Malcolm he was not good enough. Nobody had to. The message was structural. It was embedded in who got invited to dinners, who got introduced to clients, who got the benefit of the doubt, and who got the extra scrutiny. Malcolm did not complain publicly. He did not file grievances. He did not shout about injustice in the break room. Instead, he did something far more dangerous. He watched, he documented, he learned. He studied the architecture of corporate bias not as a victim, but as a student. And when he had learned enough, he made a decision. It was midnight. He was standing alone in the office, the last one on the floor as usual, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city glittered beneath him like a circuit board, millions of connections firing in the dark. And in that moment something shifted inside him, something quiet but permanent. He said it out loud to no one and to everyone. If they will not build a seat for me at their table, I will build my own table, and that is exactly what he did. But the road from that midnight decision to a $4 billion empire almost broke him first. Malcolm launched Kingsbridge Capital from a rented office above a dry cleaner on the south side of Chicago. The space was barely 400 square feet. The carpet was stained. The radiator clanked like it was trying to communicate in Morse code. His desk was a folding table he bought from a church sale for $12. His chair was borrowed from his landlord's kitchen. The only thing in that office that looked like it belonged to a future billionaire was Malcolm himself. The first year nearly destroyed him. He pitched to 47 potential clients. 43 said no, 2 said maybe, and then ghosted him. 1 said yes, but pulled out after a month. The last one, a small pension fund manager from the South Side, gave him a chance because she said she liked the way he explained risk. He told her the truth every time, even when the truth was not what she wanted to hear. She respected that. She stayed. She became his foundation. But money was tight, dangerously tight. There were months when Malcolm could not pay himself. Months when the electric bill for the office went unpaid because he was funneling every dollar into research, into models, into building the infrastructure of a company that nobody believed in yet. Nobody except one person, Amara. Amara Diallo Adiemi was a pediatric surgeon who had emigrated from Senegal to complete her residency in the United States. She was precise, disciplined, brilliant, and she had the kind of warmth that made children stop crying the moment she walked into a hospital room. She and Malcolm met at a mutual friend's dinner party in Chicago, the kind of gathering where everyone was pretending to be more successful than they were. But Amara was not pretending. She was exactly who she appeared to be, a woman of substance who had no patience for performance. Their first conversation lasted 4 hours. Malcolm told her about Kingsbridge, about his vision, about the midnight decision. She listened without interrupting, which was rare for someone as opinionated as Amara. When he finished, she asked one question: why infrastructure? He told her. Because infrastructure is invisible until it breaks. Roads, bridges, rail systems, airlines, nobody thinks about them until they fail. And when they fail, everything stops. I want to invest in the things that keep the world moving, the bones of civilization, the things people depend on but never see. She looked at him for a long time after that. Then she smiled and said, "You are either going to change the world or go bankrupt trying. Either way, I want to watch." They were married within a year, during the hardest season of Kingsbridge, when the company was bleeding money and Malcolm was working 20-hour days, and the doubt was thick enough to choke on. Amara held the household together. She covered the mortgage. She covered groceries. She never once complained. Not because she was passive. Amara was the furthest thing from passive, but because she understood something fundamental about Malcolm. He was not chasing money. He was building something that mattered, and she believed in the builder even when the building looked like it might collapse. There was one night that Malcolm would never forget as long as he lived. It was past midnight. He came home to find Amara standing in the kitchen, still in her surgical scrubs, a cup of rooibos tea in her hand, her eyes tired but steady. He started to apologize for being late, for being absent, for being consumed by something that had not yet proven itself worthy of the consumption. She stopped him. She set her tea down, looked him in the eye, and said 4 words that became the foundation of everything he built after that. She said, "You do not quit. That is not what we do. We build." He heard his mother's voice in hers. He heard his father's hands in her steadiness. He heard every lesson he had ever learned about endurance and character, and showing up when showing up is the hardest thing you can do. He went back to work the next morning, and the morning after that, and every morning for the next decade. If this story is already giving you chills, let me tell you, we are just getting started. What happens next is going to change everything. So if you have not subscribed to this channel yet, now is the time. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, because the moment Malcolm walks into that boardroom, you are going to want to be here for every single word. Let us keep going. Within 5 years, Kingsbridge Capital managed $800 million in assets. Within 10 years, it crossed $4 billion. Malcolm's specialty remained infrastructure, airlines, rail systems, logistics networks, supply chain architecture, the things that most investors found unglamorous. Malcolm found essential. He did not invest in trends. He did not chase hype cycles. He invested in things that moved people, literally and figuratively. He was not flashy. There were no yachts, no tabloid appearances, no social media accounts filled with pictures of private jets and champagne. Malcolm's name appeared in the Financial Times, in Bloomberg, in Forbes, but always in the context of deals and strategy, never in the context of spectacle. He was the kind of billionaire that most people had never heard of, and that was exactly how he wanted it. But quiet did not mean passive, and invisible did not mean powerless. When Orion Atlantic Airways began to stumble, Malcolm was watching. The airline was one of the top 5 carriers in the United States, but it was hemorrhaging revenue. Its fleet was aging. Its fuel costs were skyrocketing. Its public relations team was putting out fires every other week, from customer complaints to labor disputes to environmental criticism. The board was in disarray. 2 CEOs had come and gone in 4 years. Wall Street had downgraded the stock twice. Most investors saw a sinking ship. Malcolm saw a blueprint. He spent 3 months studying Orion Atlantic from the outside. He reviewed every earnings call, every SEC filing, every customer satisfaction survey, every route performance metric. He flew the airline 12 times in 2 months, sitting in different cabins, on different routes, observing everything from boarding procedures to meal service to how the crew handled delays. He was not just looking at numbers, he was looking at culture. And what he saw was a company that had lost its identity, a company that had forgotten why it existed. Then he made his move quietly, strategically. He negotiated a 14% equity stake through a series of structured purchases that barely made a ripple in the financial press. He did not want his name on the fuselage. He did not want a press conference. He wanted his vision in the engines, and then he began building the proposal. The one that would change everything, $6.4 billion, electric hybrid engines, next-generation navigation systems, a complete overhaul of the airline's carbon footprint, route optimization powered by machine learning, new crew training protocols, upgraded passenger experience across every cabin class. It was not just a modernization plan, it was a reinvention. And at its core was a simple idea that an airline could be profitable and responsible at the same time, that efficiency and ethics were not enemies, that the future of aviation did not have to be built on the wreckage of the planet. Malcolm was not just investing in an airline. He was investing in a future where planes flew cleaner, smarter, and, if he had anything to say about it, fairer. The proposal was ready. The board meeting was set. London, Wednesday morning. Glass-walled conference room overlooking the Thames, 12 directors, 1 CEO. And Malcolm Adeyemi, the man who had quietly become the most important person in the room before he even walked through the door. All he had to do was get on a plane. Along the way, Malcolm had built more than a company. He had built a family. His daughter, Nadia, was 23 years old and in her 2nd year at Georgetown Law. She was sharp as a scalpel and twice as unforgiving. She had inherited her mother's precision and her father's patience. Though she would never admit the latter, she challenged Malcolm on everything: politics, strategy, even his taste in music, and he loved every second of it. She made him sharper, she made him accountable, and she reminded him every single day that the work he was doing was not just for quarterly reports. It was for the generation that would inherit whatever he built. The Adeyemi home was in Decatur, Georgia, a wide porch, a jasmine garden that Amara tended with the same care she brought to surgery, a kitchen that smelled like jollof rice on Sundays. It was not a mansion. It was not designed to impress. It was designed to be lived in. And Malcolm lived in it fully, hiking with Nadia on weekends, cooking with Amara on Thursday nights, reading on the porch while the sky turned gold. He had everything: the empire, the family, the respective boardrooms across 3 continents. But none of it, not a single dollar, not a single title, not a single accolade, could protect him from what happened next. And what happened next started with a woman in a white sweater who decided he did not belong. It was a Tuesday evening at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. The sky outside had bruised to a deep purple over the tarmac. The last streaks of daylight clung to the horizon, like they were not ready to let go. Inside the terminal, the world moved with mechanical indifference. Gate agents made announcements. Coffee shops wiped down counters. Passengers shuffled through concourses with rolling bags and tired eyes. It was the kind of evening that felt ordinary in every way. Malcolm approached the gate for Orion Atlantic Flight 714, non-stop service to London Heathrow. He handed his boarding pass and passport to the gate agent. She scanned both. No flag, no alert, no issue, but also no greeting, no welcome aboard, no have a nice flight, just a flat, mechanical nod and a gesture toward the jet bridge. He noticed. He always noticed, but he filed it away. Not ignored, never ignored, but placed in the drawer marked later. He had bigger things to carry tonight. He walked onto the jet bridge, past a family hurrying toward economy, and turned left into the business class cabin. He was one of only 2 black passengers in the entire forward section. The other was a man near the back corner, earbuds in, eyes closed, already checked out from the world. Malcolm noted it the way he always noted it, not with surprise, with awareness. He settled into seat 1C aisle business class. His leather briefcase slid neatly beneath the seat in front of him. He pulled out his tablet and opened the presentation slides for the final time. Charts, projections, environmental impact models his team had spent 9 months building. There was a time, years ago, when he used to triple-check every stat, every keyword, every decimal point, terrified of being picked apart in rooms where nobody looked like him. Now he knew his work stood on its own, but he still reviewed it, not out of fear, out of respect for the craft. A flight attendant approached, young, professional, warm smile. "Can I get you anything to drink, sir?" "Sparkling water," Malcolm said. "Room temperature, if you have it, coming right up." She was kind, genuine. Malcolm returned the smile and went back to his slides. For one brief moment, the world felt right. The hum of engines warming up outside, the smell of leather and recycled air, the quiet ritual of passengers settling in, adjusting pillows, closing overhead bins. It was the kind of peace that comes right before everything breaks. Then she boarded, the woman in the white sweater, blonde, late 50s maybe, pearl earrings, catching the overhead light, silver bob cut sharp enough to make a statement. She was dragging an oversized carry-on that barely met regulation size, flustered, slightly out of breath, like she had been rushing from a connection. When she stepped into the business-class cabin and saw Malcolm sitting in 1C, her steps faltered, just slightly, just enough. She did not say hello. She did not nod. She looked at him the way someone looks at a misplaced object, a winter coat in summer, a novel in a toolbox, something that does not fit the picture as they have drawn it in their mind. Then she sat down in 1D directly across the aisle from him, without a single word of acknowledgement. Malcolm noticed. He filed it. The drawer was getting full tonight. Minutes passed. The captain made his announcement. "Good evening, folks. Flight time to London Heathrow tonight is approximately 8 hours and 20 minutes. We are expecting smooth conditions for most of the journey. Sit back and enjoy the flight." Malcolm leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment. The weight of preparation, of expectation, of everything riding on tomorrow, sat heavy in his chest. But it was a familiar pressure. He had carried heavier things. He thought about Amara, about Nadia, about the 100 new jobs the modernization deal would create, about the engineers and designers and technicians who would build something meaningful if this proposal went through. He thought about his father sanding wood in Ibadan, about his mother stitching thread into cloth, about the red dirt road and the suitcase held together with tape and the note that said "take up space." Then he heard it. Low, tense, near the galley, a voice that was trying to be quiet, but was not quiet enough. I do not want to cause any trouble. But do you know if that gentleman was supposed to be seated here, in this section? Malcolm opened one eye. The woman in the white sweater was speaking to a flight attendant, an older man with silver temples and a name tag that read Gregory. Her body language was leaned-in conspiratorial. The posture of someone sharing a secret they want to pretend is a concern. She said it with a smile. The kind of smile that tries to dress suspicion in the clothing of care. The kind of smile that says, I am not being racist, I am just being cautious. The kind of smile that has launched 1,000 humiliations. Gregory blinked. He looked at Malcolm, then back at the woman. He hesitated, and that hesitation was the first domino. I am sure everything is fine, he said, but let me just double-check with the gate team. He walked away. The woman settled back into her seat, satisfied, like she had done her civic duty. Malcolm watched from the corner of his eye. He did not say anything. He did not confront her. He sipped his sparkling water and returned to his tablet. He did not know it yet, but that was the last peaceful moment of his evening. 7 minutes later, 2 men appeared at the front of the cabin. They were not flight attendants. They wore dark blazers with small radio earpieces and lanyards that identified them as airline security personnel. The kind of men who only appear when something has allegedly gone wrong. The taller one had a clipboard. The shorter one had the posture of someone who had been told to look serious but was not entirely sure why. They stopped at row 1. They looked at Malcolm, sir, the taller one said, his voice carefully neutral but loud enough to carry 3 rows deep. We need to ask you to step into the jet bridge for a moment. Malcolm looked up slowly. His expression did not change. That was the thing about Malcolm and Emmy. His face never betrayed urgency. It was a skill he had learned from his father, a man who could sand a piece of wood for 3 hours without once looking frustrated. Composure was not passivity. It was strategy. Is there an issue with my booking? Malcolm asked. We just need to verify a few things, such as the shorter man shifted his weight. Your identification, your seating assignment, standard procedure. Malcolm set his tablet down. He looked both men directly in the eye. I handed my passport and boarding pass to the gate agent 19 minutes ago. She scanned both. There was no flag, no alert, no discrepancy. So I will ask you one more time. What exactly are you verifying? Silence. The cabin had gone completely still. Conversations dropped to nothing. A man 2 rows back lowered his newspaper just enough to watch. A young couple near the window exchanged a glance but said nothing. A businessman across the aisle pretended to study his phone, but his eyes were not moving across the screen. Everyone was watching. No one was speaking. The silence of 38 people who had decided that this was not their problem. Sir, the taller man said, lowering his voice as if volume were the issue. We would prefer not to make this a scene. Malcolm let that sentence hang in the air. We would prefer not to make this a scene, as if he were the one making it, as if his mere presence, sitting quietly, reviewing documents, drinking water, constituted a disruption. As if existing in a seat he paid for was itself a provocation. He closed his tablet, placed it in his briefcase, stood up, all 6 feet 2 inches of him. He buttoned his jacket with the slow precision of a man who understood that every gesture in this moment would be remembered, not by the passengers who were pretending not to watch, but by him, by his own sense of who he was and what he refused to become. I will come with you, he said, but I want names, both of yours. And whoever made the call, neither man responded. Malcolm stepped into the aisle. As he walked toward the front of the cabin, he passed seat 1D, the woman in the white sweater. She was staring at her phone with theatrical intensity, scrolling through nothing, gripping the device so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She did not look up. She did not make eye contact. She had lit the match, and now she was pretending she could not see the fire. Malcolm did not say a word to her. He did not need to. Silence, deployed correctly, is louder than any confrontation. They walked him down the jet bridge and into a side corridor near the gate. No handcuffs, no arrest. Just the kind of questioning that is designed to feel official but carries no legal weight. The kind that exists in the grey space between protocol and prejudice. The corridor was cold. industrial fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a fire extinguisher on the wall, a stack of wheelchair tags on a metal shelf. It was the kind of space that exists between worlds. Not quite the terminal, not quite the sky, a nowhere place where dignity goes to be tested. Full name, the shorter man said, pen hovering over a notepad. Malcolm Oladele, purpose of travel, business, meeting in London, returning Thursday, employer. I am the managing director of my own firm. The man wrote something down without looking up, and the name of that firm. Malcolm paused, not because he was afraid, not because he was unsure. He paused because he wanted them to feel the full weight of what they were about to learn. He wanted the air to change. He wanted the ground beneath their feet to shift. Kingsbridge Capital, he said. We are the largest private equity stakeholder in Orion Atlantic Airways. I hold a 14% ownership stake in this airline, $3.2 billion. And tomorrow morning, I am presenting a $6.4 billion modernization proposal to your CEO and your entire board of directors in London. The pen stopped moving. The shorter man looked up. The taller one looked at his clipboard as if it had personally betrayed him. Something cracked in the air between them, not audible, but real, the kind of crack that happens when certainty collapses. A beat passed, then another, then a third that stretched long enough to fill with everything they should have done differently. A supervisor materialized from behind a door Malcolm had not noticed. A woman in her 40s, hair pulled tight, lanyards swinging, clipboard clutched against her chest like armor. She had clearly been briefed in a hurry. Her face was arranged into professional concern, but her eyes were moving too fast. Mr. Ademi, she began, and he could hear the rehearsal in her voice. We sincerely apologize for the inconvenience. It appears there was a miscommunication from the cabin. A concern was raised by a fellow passenger, and our crew followed standard protocol. What protocol? Malcolm asked. His voice had not risen a single decibel since this began, and somehow that made it more devastating than if he had shouted. What protocol instructs your staff to remove a ticketed, verified business-class passenger from his seat based on the discomfort of a stranger? I would like to see it. I would like to read the specific policy that authorizes the removal of a paying customer who has committed no violation, broken no rule, and caused no disturbance. Show it to me. She did not have an answer. What she had was a voucher, a rebooking offer, a meal credit. The corporate toolkit of shallow contrition. She held it out like a peace offering. We have arranged for you to board the next available flight to London, leaving in approximately 3 hours. We have upgraded your seat and included full lounge access and dining credit. Malcolm looked at the voucher. He did not touch it. You can keep that, he said quietly. What I want is the incident report, unredacted. Every communication between the cabin crew and your security team. The original passenger complaint, if there is one, all of it. On my attorney's desk by Thursday. She opened her mouth to respond, but he was not finished. And you can tell your CEO that when I sit across from him tomorrow morning, and I will be sitting across from him, this conversation will be the first item on the agenda, not the fleet, not the engines, not the $6.4 billion. This, he gave them one final look, not anger, not contempt. Something worse, disappointment from someone who had the power to act on it. Then he turned and walked away. His shoes clicked against the linoleum with a rhythm that sounded, to the supervisor, at least, like a countdown. Most people would have snapped. Most people would have called the press from the terminal and turned this into a spectacle, a viral video, a public shaming campaign. Most people would have let the rage take over, because the rage was justified. Every ounce of it. But Malcolm Ademi was not most people. He did not want revenge. He wanted something far more dangerous. He wanted change, and he knew exactly how to get it. He found a quiet corner of the terminal, away from the gate. He sat down on a bench that overlooked the tarmac, where planes taxied in the dark like enormous glowing insects. He opened his laptop, and he began making calls. The first call was to Diane Okafor. Diane was his attorney, a former federal prosecutor who had spent 15 years making corporations wish they had behaved better. She had a reputation in legal circles that preceded her into every room, and it was a reputation built not on theatrics but on results. She picked up on the second ring. Malcolm told her what happened, every detail, the woman, the whisper, the security officers, the jet bridge, the voucher. Deanne was silent for exactly 4 seconds. Then she said, in the flattest voice imaginable, "They pulled you off a plane." "Yes, a plane belonging to the airline you are the largest investor in." "Yes," she exhaled. "I will have a demand letter drafted before you land. I want the incident report, the crew communication logs, the security dispatch records, and any passenger complaint documentation. If they push back, I will file a discovery motion by Friday." "Thank you, Diane. Do not thank me. Thank them. They just gave us everything we need." The second call was to Amara. She picked up on the first ring. She always did when he was traveling. "How was boarding?" she asked. Her voice was warm, familiar, the sound of home from 4,000 miles away. He told her everything, and when he finished, there was a silence on the other end. 4 seconds, maybe 5, the kind of silence that is not empty but full of fury, full of exhaustion, full of every time this had happened before in smaller ways that never made the news. When Amara spoke again, her voice was low and precise, the same tone she used before she picked up a scalpel-controlled devastation. "They do not know what they have done," she said. "No," Malcolm agreed. "They do not." A pause. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Not physically, I mean you." He thought about it, really thought. He thought about the jet bridge, the fluorescent lights, the woman who would not look at him, the silence of 38 people who watched and said nothing. "I will be," he said, "after tomorrow. Come home to me when it is done." "I will." The third call was to Nadia, his daughter, Georgetown Law. Second year. She picked up with noise in the background, a study group, probably, voices and the rustling of textbooks. "Hey, Dad, how is the trip?" he told her. The background noise disappeared. She had walked somewhere private. When she spoke, she did not gasp. She did not cry. She went quiet for a moment, and then she laughed. Not with humor, with recognition. The kind of laugh that says, "I have heard this story before, and I am so tired of hearing it. Dad, you literally own part of that airline, 14%, and they pulled you off like you were trespassing. They asked me to step off politely, which is almost worse." She was quiet again. "Then, what are you going to do?" Malcolm looked out the terminal window at the planes taxiing in the dark, lights blinking, engines humming, thousands of passengers trusting the system to carry them safely from one place to another, a system built on invisible infrastructure, a system he partially owned. "I am going to make sure this never happens to anyone else on one of those planes," he said. "And then I am going to buy another 5%. He rebooked on a competitor airline, leaving 90 minutes later. He boarded without incident. He sat in his seat. He closed his eyes, and somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, while the world slept beneath him, Malcolm Adeyemi began restructuring not just his presentation, but his entire approach to the meeting ahead. The fleet modernization was still the goal, but now it had a new first chapter. He landed at Heathrow at 6:47 in the morning, London time. The air outside was cool and damp, the sky the color of wet cement. He moved through customs without delay, collected his bag, and stepped into a waiting car. By 7:30 he was in his hotel room. By 7:45 he had showered. By 8 o'clock he was in a fresh suit, the second one he always packed, because he had learned long ago that preparation was not paranoia but respect for the unknown. By 8:15 he was standing in the lobby of Orion Atlantic Airways European headquarters. The building was glass and steel, modern in the way that corporations use architecture to project transparency. They do not actually practice. Clean lines, open atriums. A waterfall feature in the lobby that was supposed to suggest calm, but only suggested expense. The board was already assembled, 12 directors around a long mahogany table, crystal water glasses, leather portfolios. The quiet hum of people who believed they were about to sit through a standard investment presentation. At the head of the table sat Richard Hale, CEO, ruddy-faced. Early 60s, the kind of man who wore authority like an old coat, comfortable but slightly worn at the edges. He had steered Orion Atlantic through 2 mergers, 1 congressional hearing, and a fuel crisis that nearly grounded half the fleet. He was experienced. He was connected, and right now he was nervous. Because he had been briefed, he stood when Malcolm entered, extended his hand. The handshake lingered half a second too long. The handshake of a man who knows he is shaking hands with someone who holds a grenade. "Malcolm," he said, "I want you to know we have seen the preliminary reports from Atlanta. I am deeply—" "Sit down, Richard." 2 words. No exclamation point, no raised voice, no theatrical gesture. Just a calm, clear directive from a man who had earned the right to give it. Malcolm did not wait for a response. He walked to the head of the table, set his briefcase down, and remained standing. The room went completely still. 12 directors, 24 eyes. The kind of silence that has weight. Malcolm reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single printed document. He placed it on the mahogany table, centered, deliberate, and slid it toward the middle of the room like a chess piece moving into position. "Before we discuss the fleet," he said, "before we discuss engines or routes or emissions targets or any of the $6.4 billion on the table, we are going to discuss this." He tapped the document once. "This is the incident report from last night. Orion Atlantic Flight 714, Atlanta to London. I was removed from my seat in business class by your airline security team, based on a complaint from a fellow passenger who decided, based on nothing more than the color of my skin, that I did not belong in the cabin I had paid to sit in. Your security team escorted me off the aircraft. Your supervisor offered me a meal voucher." He paused, let the words settle into the mahogany. "Because if this is how your airline treats the man who funds your future, I need to understand what it does to the passengers who cannot fight back, the ones who do not have attorneys, the ones who do not hold 14% of your stock, the ones who just want to get on a plane and be treated like a human being." Nobody moved. Richard Hale sat with his hands flat on the table, his face cycling through expressions he was trying to control. The other directors were frozen in the particular way that powerful people freeze when they realize the power dynamic has shifted beneath them without warning. Malcolm continued, "I am not pulling my investment. That would be easy, and easy does not change anything. Instead, I am adding a condition to the modernization agreement. 3 conditions. Actually, he held up one finger. First, Orion Atlantic will establish an independent oversight board for passenger rights, not an internal committee, not a suggestion box, an independent body with binding authority to investigate complaints, review crew conduct, and recommend disciplinary action. Funded by the airline but operated autonomously. Second, you will implement mandatory bias training across every level of operations. Not the kind where employees watch a 45-minute video and check a box. A kind that changes how your crew thinks before they act, ongoing evaluated, with real consequences for non-compliance. Third, you, Richard, will personally issue a public statement acknowledging what happened. Not a corporate apology drafted by your legal team and sanitized until it means nothing, a human statement with your name on it. Acknowledging that what happened was wrong, explaining what you are doing to fix it, and committing to a standard that this company has never held itself to before. He lowered his hand. Those are my conditions. They are non-negotiable. They will be incorporated into the modernization agreement before any funds are deployed. The silence in the room was absolute. The kind of silence you could lean against. Richard Hale cleared his throat. He looked at Malcolm the way a man looks at a storm he cannot outrun. "And if we decline?" he asked carefully. Malcolm leaned back in his chair. For the first time all morning, he allowed himself to breathe slowly. Not because he was relaxed, because he wanted them to feel the calm before the consequence. "Then I exercise my contractual right to call an extraordinary shareholders' meeting. I present the full incident with documentation, the complaint, the crew logs, the security dispatch, the voucher, all of it. I let your investors decide whether a company that profiles its own stakeholders deserves $6.4 billion in modernization funding. I let the market react. And based on the conversations I have already had with 3 of your top 10 institutional shareholders, your stock will drop 9% before lunch. That is not a threat, Richard. That is math silence. Long, heavy reel. Then, slowly, Richard Hale nodded. Draft the terms, he said quietly. Malcolm held his gaze for a moment longer, not to gloat, not to savor, but to make sure the message had landed all the way. Then he opened his briefcase, pulled out the fleet modernization presentation, and set it on the table beside the incident report. Now, he said, let us talk about the future. This was not victory. Not yet. Victory would be the day a black man could sit in seat 1C and nobody questioned whether he belonged. That day had not arrived. Malcolm knew it might not arrive in his lifetime, but this was a brick, a real one, laid with precision by a man who had learned from a carpenter in Ibadan that you build things one piece at a time. You sand them until they are smooth. You do not rush, and you do not stop. Listen to me. If this story just gave you chills, and I know it did, do me a favor right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Tag someone who has been underestimated. Send it to someone who has ever been made to feel like they did not belong. And if you have not subscribed yet, hit that button right now, because the way this story ends is going to stay with you. Trust me. The news broke 48 hours later. Malcolm made sure it did not break as a scandal. He was precise about that. He did not want spectacle. He wanted precedent. His PR team coordinated with the Financial Times and 2 other outlets to frame the story not as a takedown but as a turning point. The Financial Times headline read, Orion Atlantic announces landmark passenger rights initiative after internal bias incident. The Guardian ran a profile, the investor who refused a voucher and demanded a revolution. Bloomberg covered the financial angle. Kingsbridge Capital CEO leverages equity position to force airline industry reform. Malcolm did not do interviews. He did not appear on talk shows. He did not post on social media. He let the policies speak, because policies outlast news cycles. Policies change behavior long after the cameras turn off and the hashtags stop trending. Within 6 months, Orion Atlantic's bias complaint rate dropped by 62%. Their customer satisfaction scores in minority demographics increased by 41%. 3 flight attendants and 2 gate supervisors were retrained. 1 was terminated. The Independent Oversight Board issued its first quarterly report, and it did not pull punches. It identified systemic gaps in crew communication, recommended changes to complaint escalation procedures, and published its findings publicly, just as Malcolm had demanded. Within a year, 3 other major carriers adopted similar frameworks, not because they wanted to, because their shareholders demanded it, because their customers demanded it, because the precedent Malcolm had set made it impossible to pretend the problem did not exist. The $6.4 billion deal closed 3 weeks after the board meeting, every penny intact, every clause honored, every condition met. The fleet modernization began with the first batch of electric hybrid engines being delivered to Orion Atlantic's maintenance hub in Dublin. Within 2 years, the airline would reduce its carbon emissions by 31%. Within 5, it would become the first major carrier in the Western Hemisphere to achieve carbon-neutral certification on domestic routes. And every seat on every Orion Atlantic flight now carried, invisibly, the fingerprint of a man who was told he did not belong and proved, without ever raising his voice, that he owned the sky. 3 months after the incident, on a Sunday evening in Decatur, Georgia, Malcolm sat on the back porch of his home. The jasmine was in full bloom. The air was warm and thick with the smell of it. Amara sat beside him, a cup of rooibos tea in her hands, her feet tucked beneath her on the cushion. The sky was doing that thing it does in Georgia in the late summer, turning from gold to rose to violet in layers, so beautiful they looked like they were painted by someone who wanted to remind you that the world, for all its cruelty, is still capable of extraordinary gentleness. His phone buzzed, a text from Nadia. Professor used your case in constitutional law today. Full class discussion. 45 minutes. I did not tell anyone you were my dad. I wanted them to admire you without knowing. Malcolm read it twice. Then he set his phone down on the arm of the chair and looked at the sky. "Do you ever get tired?" Amara asked softly. He thought about it. Really thought, not the quick answer, not the strong answer. The honest one. He thought about the plane, the jet bridge, the fluorescent lights, the clipboard, the voucher, the woman in the white sweater who would not look at him, the 38 passengers who watched and said nothing, the lifetime of rooms where his presence was a question mark before he ever opened his mouth, the promotions that went to someone else, the doors that did not open, the tables that did not have a seat for him, the years and years and years of being excellent in a world that kept asking him to prove he deserved to be in the room. "Yes," he said. "I get tired." Amara reached over and placed her hand on his. Her fingers were warm, steady, surgeon's hands, healer's hands, the same hands that had held their daughter for the first time, the same hands that had pressed a cup of tea in a midnight kitchen and said, "You do not quit," the same hands that had been holding him together, quietly, faithfully, for 26 years. "But tired is not the same as done," he said. She squeezed his hand. "No," she agreed, "it is not." They sat there as the sky darkened, as the stars came out one by one, each one a small light in an enormous darkness, persistent, ancient, unbothered by the chaos below. Somewhere high above them, a plane crossed the heavens, lights blinking, engines humming, carrying strangers toward destinations they trusted the world to let them reach. Malcolm watched it pass and thought about his father in Ibadan, sanding wood until it was smooth, never rushing, never stopping, building things that lasted because he refused to cut corners, even when no one was watching. He thought about his mother standing in the doorway of that small house on the red dirt road, fabric dust on her apron, love in her eyes, steel in her voice. "The world will try to make you small," he smiled. He had taken up space anyway, and somewhere in London, in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the Thames, a framed copy of Orion Atlantic's new passenger rights charter hung on the wall. It was printed on heavy stock paper with clean black text. Most people who walked past it did not stop to read it. It was just another corporate document in a building full of corporate documents. But if you looked closely at the very bottom, in small print, there was a dedication. It read, "For every passenger who was told they did not belong." Malcolm's name was nowhere on it. He did not need it to be. The policy was his signature. The change was his legacy. And every plane that took off under that charter carried his fingerprint into the sky, not on the fuselage, in the engines, exactly where he wanted it. If this story moved you, and I mean really moved you, do me one last favor. Hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me what moment hit you the hardest. Was it the jet bridge? Was it Amara in the kitchen? Was it Nadia's text? Tell me, I want to hear from you. Subscribe if you have not already, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that their seat at the table is not something anyone can take away. You earned it, you belong in it, and do not let anyone, not a stranger, not a system, not a silence, tell you otherwise. I am Mr. Andy, and I will see you in the next one.